Empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men, shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives.
Welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where the intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. This show is based on the simple idea that every Black man is capable of creating inner peace, dynamic health, great relationships, and financial abundance. Therefore, we provide insights and strategies to educate, motivate, and inspire Black men to reach their full potential and create the life of their dreams. So if you're ready for some high-octane motivation and inspiration that supports and empowers you to live the life you were born to live, get ready to shatter the stereotypes so you can build a life that lights you up and positively impacts the world. So now, let's shatter the stereotypes with your host, Coach Michael Taylor.
Hello, and welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where our intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. You see, there's never been a shortage of Black male role models. There's only been a lack of exposure of those role models. So the intention here is to showcase and highlight Black men who are doing amazing things in the world. And joining me today is a gentleman who is doing just that. His name is Robert Turner. And I ran across Robert on LinkedIn. And he posted on LinkedIn that he had received a patent from Apple. And I thought, wow, that's pretty impressive. So I want to get him on the show, talk a little bit about his journey to becoming an engineer, and just get a little insights on what he's got going on in the future. So without further ado, let's welcome Robert to the show. Robert, how you doing today, man?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Fantastic. So before we jump into talking about engineering, we want to start off with just a few icebreaker questions. So first of all, tell us where you're from and a little bit about growing up.
Yeah, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, born and raised. Really grew up in a single-parent household. Grew up with my mom. We lived with my grandma for a little bit, but it was all love growing up. Never really, had to want for much. But I was lucky enough to be exposed to science and engineering at an early age. I definitely think my mom pushed me into that rather than let me, go to my own devices. Definitely led me to where I am today. I'm grateful to her for that.
Well, with that being said, name a woman who's inspired you to be who you are.
A woman that's inspired me to be who I am, I definitely say my grandmother.
Okay.
She was always, somebody that was always back in my corner. From the time I was, 5 years old. I'm paying for you to go to college. I pay for you to go to college. And, she really supported that. And unfortunately, she passed a couple years into my college career, and her health wasn't doing too well, so she wasn't able to pay for college. But I did go to college on my own, and if you're here today, I know she'd be really happy with where I am in life.
And what's her name? Put her name out there for us.
Her name is Mildred Moore.
Mildred Moore, great.
Yeah.
Good old grandma.
Grandma.
So name a man that you look up to.
And I look up to, definitely say, my uncle, my mom's sister's husband. He is a really stand-up guy. He kind of filled in that gap for me. My father wasn't there. He was an Army, E7 in the Army, had 3 kids, and all raised them to be really stand-up guys, really stand-up fathers. And he definitely set the example about what a man should be. And I think one of my fondest memories of him was actually when I was about 11 years old, and he taught me how to tie a tie. He stood there with me for about 3 hours until I got it right. I had to tie a full winter knot.
Nice.
I still have the opportunity to go back and see him every now and again, and he's still, still that man I look up to. I always have a good time. I always have good talks with him.
There you go. Great role model, obviously. Now, if you were trapped on an island for, say, 60 days or so, and you could only take one book with you on that island, what book would you take?
What book would I take? Let's see. That's one of my favorites. I definitely think I'd say Animal Farm.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that book. But I read it back when I was in middle school, and it showed me about how the world works as far as like power dynamics and social dynamics. And
yeah.
I think my hope would be that I can make it off that island and eventually assimilate back to the real world. So I think reading something like that would a lot of imagery and a good storyline behind it. Definitely helped me keep my sanity too.
There you go. Now, if you love movies, name a movie that you love.
Movie, definitely Pulp Fiction. Love that
Pulp
movie.
Fiction.
Yeah. I was actually playing charades with some of my friends last night, and that was one of the clues that they had to guess with Pulp Fiction. So I did a little Samuel scene where he had the gun pointed at the guy's head. He had a crazy look in his eye. Yeah, I definitely love that movie as far as storyline. Love Quentin Tarantino movies. Never misses a thing.
Yeah, that Samuel Jackson's amazing.
Yeah.
Nobody can curse like Samuel L. Jackson.
Nobody. The MF word, man, it just comes out so easily off his tongue,
Yeah. So, what would a perfect day for Robert look like? I mean, if you woke up one morning and your day was perfect, what would you be doing for that day?
Really, I'd work everything done, get everything done pretty seamlessly, and just really have time to kick with my family, man. I'm at a point in my life where, even at this young age, my personality for a long time was shaped so much by my professional life and who I was as a professional. I never really got to develop my personality as an adult, not centered around my professional life. And now that I have the opportunity after graduation to be an entrepreneur and be more in control of my time, I got to realize what's truly important and being around my family and just being able to have good times with them. Like, that's a perfect day for me.
There you go. Now, if I gave you a magic wand, and with this magic wand, you could create anything your heart desired, what would Robert's life look 10 years from now with that magic wand?
10 years from now, I talk about this with my friend. We actually probably somewhere either, like Wyoming, Colorado, something like that with nice scenic beauty, or somewhere out the country. And this is an impeccably designed house where it's just in such great harmony with nature. Maybe have grass growing instead of carpet, something like that, like natural wood, concrete, rock, maybe got a river flowing through it. But definitely an eco house. And being able to live in harmony with nature and not worrying too much about the artificial stressors that we create, living our day-to-day lives. And so if I could retire by 35, I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't be unhappy with that. I definitely want to do something that can keep me going intellectually and keep giving my gift to the world. But I definitely like to be in a place, financially, professionally, where, I can cultivate the kind of life that I want to live. And that life is, being in peace and harmony with nature.
Nice. I'm a huge outdoors guy also, and I have this passion for mountains, man. I just love being in the mountains. There's something spiritual about it for me. I just love it. So obviously there's a lot of stuff going on right now. And so there are some people who are pretty pessimistic about the future, while others are pretty optimistic about the future in general. So where do you fall on that spectrum between optimism and pessimism for the future in general? Where do you fall?
Future in general, I think I lean more towards the optimistic side.
Okay.
The way my worldview is that, with time, things only get better. And that's been mostly true for my life. We hit a few cliffs and drop-offs, maybe a few plateaus here and there, but generally, usually at unexpected times, you get some good news that kind of takes your life and your circumstances to the next level. And adopting that worldview, that kind of helps me be at ease. I understand, things may not be where I want to be now, may not be ideal at the moment, but they will get better. And I generally feel that way about the world, I think, especially now we're coming to a point where, we're kind of pulling back the curtain and all the things that, we may not have known about society. The things might have been ignorant to are kind of coming to light. And, people are they're taking that responsibility on themselves and us as a society to fix these, because we realize, like, either it's chaos and it's war and it's destruction that we have to deal with, or we need to be intentional about how we create a society that we can all live in and be in harmony with one another. So I see that in other people, and I'm definitely optimistic about the future because of that.
Fantastic. And it's people like yourself that gives me reasons for optimism, because I'll be 60 this year, right? So I've always been optimistic, and I know a lot of my friends. As a matter of fact, most of my friends, my nickname is Michael Happy Ass Taylor because I'm always positive, I'm always happy. But it's really good to see young men like yourself who are having an optimistic outlook and seeing that they can actually influence the future by who they are and what they're doing. So you've got some pretty big dreams and visions, and we're going to talk about that. But I'm really glad to hear someone like yourself that's so optimistic, because that's the lens I see the world. I recognize all the challenges, but at the same time, I'm extremely optimistic about what's coming up in the future. Now, with that being said, I'd like you to introduce Robert the Professional. So tell the audience about what you do.
I do it. So I graduated from TSU, Tennessee State University, Go Big Blue. Graduated last year. And around the time we graduated, my friend, she has an architectural engineering consulting business, and she was asking me to freelance some work out. And I was like, man, I really just had this entrepreneurial bug going on in me at the time. So I'm like, well, if she's asking me this, maybe I can find a market for that kind of work. And I told my advisor, my professor about that leaving. And he's like, hey, man, I'm getting my engineering license, which is what you needed. I didn't know at the time to practice engineering to the general public. He said we can partner. And from there, we founded a small consulting firm, Trust Engineering Consulting Group, LLC, based here in Nashville, Tennessee. And it started off just doing HVAC design, supporting light residential, commercial structures. And then that grew into advising and consulting on green building design as a whole. So looking at ways you can save energy over the operation of your business, looking at ways you can heat and cool your building more efficiently, and also extending that ethos of sustainability to businesses that want to adopt a more sustainable business model, and helping them get through that process and tell that story. As of late, I've been working more also on the product design side. Back in 2016, 2017, I actually had the opportunity to intern at Apple after my junior year. Worked on the Apple Watch Series 2, Apple Watch Series 3, Series 4, and a little bit of work on the iPhone 8. And I didn't really do much design work after that on the product level, but lately I've been getting more business in that area. So we decided to form our own research and development wing of the business, where we work on consumer products and products geared towards sustainability and tackling certain problems. And so that's where I am now with my business. On top of that, I work on a few educational initiatives. I was reached out to by the director of finance for the National Society of Black Engineers in Ghana. I was actually a member of NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers here in Tennessee, at TSU. And after hearing about me working at Apple, he said, can you help me put together a curriculum for students, because they don't have the opportunity to have project-based learning opportunities in university over here. And that led me down the path of education, because engineering education is something I've always been passionate about. And I've recognized the lack in the way we teach engineering and education, one in college and two in K through 12 education. And something I always say is that there's a difference between learning how to make something and design something. And our programs don't really focus on design the way they should. The initiative that I'm working on is called Democratize Design. And that means bring design and design education to the people, and not keep it in certain areas of the world of the United States. And we've made efforts of democratizing other aspects of STEM, like software engineering and coding. You can find that in pretty much any school district in the country now, all collegiate programs. And there's been efforts to democratize hardware education, learn how to do 3D printing, rapid prototyping, about Arduino hardware, and learn how to make small electronic gadgets, but we still don't focus on the design side. So we never get to the point where this education is being used to solve a real human problem in our communities. And going from developing that curriculum, now I'm in the Democratized Design initiative. I've been learning more about the pedagogy of teaching design, and learning more about the philosophy of design. And when you think about it on a high level, you realize that every system in our society, every physical system, every structure, every product is designed intentionally. And what makes the human experience so unique is the fact that it is designed, and it is a experience. It's not, you're not going through your lifetime passively. It's full of experiences, and you can maximize those experiences by the way you design. And so I want to bring that design philosophy into my community, into the Black community at large, because I feel like a lot of the Black engineering talent is being outsourced into corporate America, into the military industrial complex, the food and healthcare industrial complexes. And the problems and the intellect the intellect isn't being used to solve the problems in our community. And I think there should be a greater shift towards that in order to rectify some of the issues that we're seeing. And so, to answer your question, those are the initiatives I'm working on right now.
Nice. So, when did you first decide you wanted to be an engineer?
It was about high school. I was lucky enough in my high school. I had a pre-engineering program, and I took that for about 3 years: introduction to engineering design, computer-aided manufacturing, and principles of engineering. And they gave me an early exposure to design from about 14 up to 17. And when I went to school, I majored in electrical engineering. We had an introductory course there, and I actually decided to switch to mechanical. And it was definitely having that seed planted in me in the 9th grade. This is what an engineer is, and this is what an engineer can do. And I was actually lucky enough to have a Black woman teaching that course. She was an engineer. She graduated from my alma mater, Tennessee State University. And while I was at TSU, she actually was going back to get a PhD. So I got to work with her as an undergraduate researcher. The same, and indoctrinated me into engineering and showed me that possibility. It was able to come full circle. And
so, you said your mom obviously was a big influence on your life. So what did she do? Did you hear me? Because you kind of froze on me just a sec.
Yeah, I heard you.
Okay, so you said your mom was a huge influence, in your life. So what did she do to nurture your love for engineering? Did she do anything?
Anything. And any passion I had in that regard, she was willing to put some money and her energy behind.
Okay.
That she knew what she didn't know. She'd always tell me, I went to school back when it was first becoming a thing for Black students to be able to go to college at large. And I didn't really understand what it meant to be able to go to school and what the possibilities that would lead to. And she felt like she didn't always take full advantage of that after graduating and while she was in school. And she always, she raised me with that mindset. Like, I know that there's pieces that I'm missing, and I want to give you the tools to go out and find those pieces, because I can't teach you because I don't know, but I know there's more. And I want to give you everything possible so you can find out what more is.
Nice. So growing up, did you have any other friends who were kind of on the same path?
Yeah, going to my high school, I was in a classroom with about 30, 40 other students that took the same engineering courses. And so I'd say about maybe 25% of those actually went on to go study engineering and are practicing engineering now, either at a company or on their own. And even going through college, like I said, my friends that I met along the way, like they always had that entrepreneurial bug. And, seeing them going and starting their own businesses was largely what inspired me to do so. Seeing young 23, 24, 25-year-old Black professionals coming out of school and saying, hey, we have these resources, we have this intellect and this ability. Let's pull it together and go out and solve the problems within our community. And seeing that from people I respected and I've hung out with, partied with, traveled with, I was lucky enough to have that definitely reflected on who I am today.
That's awesome. That's really good to hear. So tell me a little bit about Tennessee State University. Why did you choose Tennessee State?
I chose TSU in part because my family went there. And truth be told, I didn't even plan on going to school when I graduated high school. I was above average student, but I didn't take my studies seriously. But I was lucky enough to be afforded a scholarship. I was enlisting in the Marine Corps at the time, and I got the Navy ROTC scholarship because my recruiters, like, I think I got like a 99 some of the ASVABs. Like, yeah, you should apply for the scholarship because you have a competitive application. And I got the scholarship, and obviously I had to pick a school. I picked TSU, not knowing that much about college. It was kind of a last minute thing. But I'm definitely happy with the decision and the connections I made and all the opportunities I've been afforded. But it's kind of like a stroke of luck and maybe divine intervention that happened. And so when you're speaking on the optimism, I've had events like that in the moment you don't really see them as life changing. But when I look back in the past and I see similar events that happen like that, I'm like, wow, like that really was a huge turning point in my life. Like going from a average student that, was always not really bad, but always just doing some knucklehead stuff. And being turned into the academic and professional I am now, and realizing the gifts that I have and that I'm able to give to this world. That was a huge turning point in my life.
Nice. Now, I have to admit, I'm a huge Apple fan.
All right.
Love everything about Apple. Macs, iPhones, you name it, Apple TV, that's my thing. And so the thing that attracted me to you when you posted on Apple that you had received a patent from Apple. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that patent.
Patent. I'll tell you what I can tell you without getting sued.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, they're pretty secretive as a company, but
yeah,
essentially, in the phone you have a button, in the watch you have a button, and buttons, the way it works is a piece of bent metal, and when you press it down, it'll click. It's think about it like a bowl that you press down in the middle. It's a real flexible bowl. You press it down in the middle, it'll click, it'll pop back up. That's how the button switch works on the electronic level. And the issue with that is that in order for it to click, it has to move pretty far, which means it takes up a lot of space in the phone and the watch, which is even smaller. And so any amount of space that you can get back, you can grow the battery by that amount. And that might be a 1 to 5%, 10% increase in the battery capacity if you can find a way to make this smaller and get that space back. I think in the iPhone 7, they started using, instead of a real switch that clicks, they used a pressure sensor. And the pressure sensor would tell the computer, okay, this is being clicked. And it would tell the vibration motor in the phone to move. The same thing that vibrates when you get a phone call, that'll move and it'll simulate what a click would feel like. And the issue with that is that having a sensor that you always need to be reading draws a lot of power from the battery. And so those were the two issues we were dealing with, making a switch that's one, smaller, and two, that doesn't drain the battery. And so this was the design that's in the patent, was a mechanical device that could still move mechanically. It wasn't a pressure switch, but it used the principles of leverage in order to move. So if you think about like a seesaw, with one side shorter and one side longer, if you press down on the shorter side, the longer side is going to move up by a much higher amount. And a few of the constraints we had to work with was that you couldn't have the electrical contacts be so close to one another that current would jump that gap. And you also need to have, when you press down on the button, that there's a certain amount of force that you need for reliable electrical contact. So we were playing with all those different variables, and we came up with the design and those patents. So if your viewers, your listeners want to go check it out, it is on my LinkedIn if you decide to share that with them, and you can read more on it.
Now, you were interning with Apple when you created this, so you get, I guess, credit for the patent, but will you also get royalties if they use it?
So the way royalties work, when you come onto a company like Apple that designs hardware or even any kind of consumer product, you say they're giving you all the tools, the resources, the network to be able to make something like this happen. And I was designing it for Apple products, so it really has no use for me as a private inventor. You get what I'm saying? And the resources they gave me were pretty extensive. The computer, to be able to model it. They had a huge prototyping facility where I could go and send something to machinists and they'd get it back to me within a couple of days, and I'd be able to test and verify that it works. A huge test setup that I could do myself. So as an engineer, it's kind of like it was like a playground. Any tools at my disposal, and the philosophy that since we're giving you the resources to create in this environment, and you create this for our product, you don't retain any monetary rights to this, right? So I think you can't have a one-way contract. So I remember signing the contract when we were talking to the patent attorneys at Apple, and it was like for $1 or something like that. So for $1, I sold the patent over to them. But as most good companies do, they'll give you a royalty or some kind of incentive to create, and they did. So even though, as it was explained in my contract, I was not guaranteed any compensation, they did give me a pretty fair compensation after the fact.
So will it actually be used?
That's up to them. I don't work there anymore, and they wouldn't tell me anyway because I don't work there anymore.
Gotcha.
But and I couldn't say anyway, even if I did know.
Gotcha. All right. Definitely don't want to get you in trouble. Now, again, I'm a big Apple fan. So did you ever have opportunity to go to their main campus?
I actually worked at the main campus.
Really?
Yeah.
The big circle one?
Oh no, not the new one. Actually, my apartment was literally right across the street. Like I could look over the fence and see it. And when I would go walk and go to the store, get some food, something like that, I would literally walk right past it. They had it fenced up for a little bit with a opaque sheet on the fence, so you can't really see too much of what's going on over there. But as the time went on, they developed more. They took some of those things down, so I could actually see the spaceship as it was being built. I haven't had the opportunity to go back since, but I do know what it looks like, and I know what the old Infinite Loop looks like. It's a huge difference, but I definitely have my nostalgia is more towards the old campus, the Infinite Loop campus, just because that's where I worked and played there.
Now, I don't think you could have chosen a better company to emulate when you start talking about design.
Right.
Because what I love about Apple is design.
Right.
Johnny Ives, I think, is the guy that, is responsible for a lot of the design stuff. So when you do your own thing, what you're doing, are you going to be designing are you thinking about creating new products yourself, or what's your idea?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we do have a R&D wing that we grew out of my consulting business, and that was to tackle a few projects that I came to for product development. I had one guy who was actually my old counterpart when I was doing research. We were actually really good friends. We're still friends to this day. He founded his own hardware development business, and he needed help designing an enclosure and doing product development for his technology. And so he reached out to me to help do that. And that led to us saying, hey, we could do our own internal research and product development. And so that's what we're doing now. But when I talk about design, like design is it's so universal and it's encompassing. Like I said, everything in society is about design. So the same design process I go through when I'm designing a product, it begins with what they call empathy, radically empathize with the person. So you literally put yourself in the person's shoes and you're figuring out like what problems are they experiencing, either using existing technology or they don't have any kind of technology to solve that problem. And then you're working through several iterations through that to arrive at, okay, this is what the actual problem is. And then you iterate more and you figure out, okay, this is the solution, a good solution to their problem. And I use that same design philosophy in doing products. I had the opportunity to do some community development work last year in 2019 on the west side of Chicago, doing a fellowship called the Summer Institute on Sustainability and Energy with the University of Illinois Chicago. And that very same design process I go through with designing products I use with social systems. So we're trying to figure out a way to solve the food desert problem in Chicago, in that neighborhood in Chicago. The issue they had was that large chain grocery stores would come in and leave after that tax incentive period ended. And when they would leave, the community would be in a worse off shape because they're used to having this resource in the community. And when they suddenly leave, they're like, where do I go? So either they got to commute far outside the neighborhood and bring back a full haul on the subway, or they're going to their convenience store. And so I had to come up with a business model that could be used to solve that problem. And the model that I came up with was like a reverse franchise, where we would have a brand that would own the distribution to a chain of convenience stores. And the convenience stores operate under this brand, retain their ownership. The store owners would retain their ownership, but they would sell the foods and have the brand identity of the overall franchise. And that would solve the issue of access, walkability, and give people access to healthy foods rather than junk foods. But to answer your question, yes, I do. I am in design, but I look at my design process as more than just designing products. I'm an engineer and I'm an architect in the sense that I look at problems in society and I work to solve those. So even the education course I mentioned began with design, the same design process. I started off interviewing the students I'm designing it for, and now I'm working through those iterations where I can give them the kind of course and experience that they need to be the best productive engineers that they can be.
Nice. Now, one of the things that I'm really excited about And I think it's possibly one of the most powerful technologies that I believe can literally change the world is 3D printing.
Yeah.
And 3D printing to me, again, is going to solve a lot of the challenges around the globe. One thing that fascinated me was that there's a company in China that 3D printed, it was like a 20-story building. I don't know if you saw this story or not, but
Yeah.
they did like a 20-story building in like a week or something. I mean, just amazing. So what are your thoughts on the 3D printing industry?
3D printing, it definitely came a long way from what it was. I remember I first got exposed to it in high school, and by that time it was already about 20, 15 years old. And it was very much like a expensive industrial kind of clunky process. And when I got to college, it became more of a mainstream consumer thing. Like you could get MakerBots for $300-$400 and be able to 3D print things for your own house. I 3D printed. I brought things. I needed certain tools, and I was able to 3D print them in the lab. I 3D printed the phone case for my phone, and so
Wow.
I think 3D printing goes right hand in hand with my design philosophy of being able to democratize design and bring people the tools that they need to have control and autonomy of their life. I think one of the issues with 3D printing is the resolution that you can get to. So if you can get to a point where you can make something quickly, make it fast, make it accurate, I think that's the next step in 3D printing, at least for a consumer household level. For the industrial level, I know they're looking into metal 3D printings and building 3D printings. I think that's really cool, being able to use rapid development techniques in order to solve these kind of problems, especially from a safety standpoint. You know, you got guys up at these high altitudes. We actually had a guy in Nashville fall from a building, and he passed away because he wasn't wearing a safety device. So I definitely think there's long-term health and safety implications of being able to use 3D printing technology.
Yeah, and so for those of you who may not be familiar with 3D printing, here's a really cool story for you. You know, we have the International Space Station, right? That's floating around up in space. Well, something broke on the International Space Station, and they needed a tool to fix it. Well, the people at NASA created the 3D image, I guess, and basically they emailed it to the space station, which has a 3D printer, and they were able to 3D print the tool on the space station to fix it. Now, to me, that is absolutely fascinating that we have that type of technology where you're sending this thing basically through space in a way, and you're 3D printing it. And so I think one of the things we have to start thinking about, especially as Black men, is to take advantage of the technology. And it begins with people like yourself who can teach, who can help design and help us utilize this amazing technology. There's a company, oh gosh, I can't remember where it was. Maybe it was Japan or whatever. And they're 3D printing like 3-bedroom houses. So they're going to get to a point where you'll be able to go to these really impoverished nations and 3D print houses pretty close to nothing. And it's probably 5-10 years down the road before the cost gets that low. But the fact that we have technology now that's allowing us to start solving a lot of these problems, once again, that's another reason for my optimism. A lot of people don't realize that they're also 3D printing body parts. I mean, it's amazing what the technology is doing. So it's really a matter of us trying to keeping up with what's going on and being a part of these new technologies. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because you're right smack dab in the middle of it as an engineer. Now, with that being said, let's talk a little bit about solar and green energy. You made some comments earlier about creating an environment one with nature. As I mentioned, I love being out in nature, but it's really important to understand the evolving solar and green energy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I definitely think that green energy is just the way to go. Another internship I had back in college, I was working at BP in oil and gas, and that really gave me a lot of insight into the industry and where it's going. You know, even a large company like BP, Shell, Exxon, they're beginning to divest and small amounts into renewable energy because they realize that this is the way forward. And when you look at it from a resource standpoint, eventually oil reserves are going to run out. And back 100 years ago, 120 years ago, when automobiles first began to hit the market mainstream, oil was so cheap and it was so abundant that we never thought about, okay, what happens when it runs out? Now we're getting to the point where it's running out. We're seeing the effects of climate change. People don't really understand why climate change is bad, but when you think about like a 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius increase a year over a 20-year period, that's what, 30 to 45 degree increase in temperature, and humanity is not going to be able to survive that unless we find ways to sequester that now and be able to rectify that situation. Like I said, green energy now is becoming much more abundant, becoming much more cheaper to produce, and finding ways to bring that to local communities, even to the individual landowners and homeowners. That's something that I work with business owners because people are realizing it and they're fed up. They understand that government policymakers aren't going to do anything about it because they have lobbyists in their pockets, and so people are taking it into their own hands. And I love seeing that. That's what galvanized me to get into this business, because I wanted to be able to help people that have that desire, but may not have that technical background to be able to do so.
Yeah, and again, I love technology for several reasons. One being, technology allows us to create equal playing fields, especially as Black folk. For example, I'm sitting here in my home office, I've got a little webcam in front of me, I've got this internet connection and computer, and I can literally broadcast my show around the globe for about $20 a month. I mean, that to me is mind-boggling, because if you were to go back just 50 years ago, to even be able to broadcast any type of signal around the world would have cost you millions of dollars, because it was basically television. But now with the internet, it's opened up a whole new opportunities for us to do pretty much anything. So it's important for us to engage in these conversations, to learn about these new technologies, and to make sure that we have representation to showcase and teach us how to use the technologies, because the world is moving rapidly. And I'm an optimist, and I just finished a book by a guy named Peter Diamandis, and he's a multi-billionaire guy, but he's a brilliant guy. But he wrote a book called "The Future is Faster Than You Think." And I highly recommend everybody read that book, "The Future is Faster Than You Think." And he talks about how quickly technology is changing and how quickly it's changing for the better. Like I said, we get so inundated with negative news stories and negative media that most people believe that the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Well, I don't believe that. I personally believe that there's never been a better time to be alive on the planet than right now. And so the way to incorporate this idea is to educate yourself to understand what's really going on. So again, I highly recommend that book, "The Future is Faster Than You Think" by Peter Diamandis. Put it on your reading list. It's really amazing. Now, the next thing that excites me, that I want to get your feedback on, are electric cars and autonomous vehicles. Once again, a lot of people don't recognize what's going on in the world. And so pretty much every major auto manufacturer is now creating or in the process of developing electric cars. So what's happening is we're moving away from fossil fuels, gasoline and so forth, and we're moving to electric vehicles. What are your thoughts on that?
Same thing with green energy. I think it's necessary. It's right on time. I think there's a lot of skepticism around it, mainly because of the cost structure behind it. But now it's getting so much more easier to make the technologies that go into these vehicles that pretty soon they're going to be right around the price point. They already are of combustion vehicles, and I definitely think that that's the way forward. It's unfortunate, like I said, there's a lot of political pressure that tries to slow that down as much as possible. I remember here in Nashville, we had plans. We were voting on getting a rail system, elevated rail system. And the powers that be spread this smear campaign about raising property taxes or all the other problems that would go along with it in order to sow dissension within the people in Nashville, to the point where a lot of people voted, the majority of people voted no against it. And it's unfortunate that we have those kind of factors working against us. But I'm thinking now that it is getting cheaper, and that it's being clear that these resources are running out, that there's going to be more popular support for technologies like electric vehicles.
Yeah, I think personally it's reached that tipping point where enough people buy into it, if you will, that it begins to shift the perception and the viability of it. And so I'm a huge fan of Elon Musk and his Tesla cars. Matter of fact, that's my dream vehicle. I want to get one. But what he's doing with that technology, and actually allowing others to, matter of fact, he put out, if I understand right, he put out all of the blueprints and everything for his technology for people to look at.
Yeah.
So if you were thinking about wanting to build an electric car, he's putting that information out there so that you can do it. But there's a place, I think, where was it? Norway. I think it was Norway, where they're really pushing this electric vehicle, where they're now about to launch a series of autonomous buses, electric buses, that are going to be driving through this neighborhood of basically elderly people who can't drive. So they can simply get on an app, call up this little vehicle, it'll come and pick them up, no drivers, and take them, around this little neighborhood. But see, I think that's just the beginning. I think we're just scratching the surface, because Elon Musk has already said he has the capacity for fully autonomous cars. Uber is now setting up where they're building a fleet of autonomous taxis. That there's still some hurdles, obviously, with, as you mentioned, the government's going to try to slow this down, but I don't think they can now because it's already tipped over. But there's a lot of amazing things that are happening that, again, I think there are reasons for optimism. But my point is, how do we, as Black people especially, get engaged in this conversation, And so being an engineer is a great place to start. Now, as a motivational speaker, my job is to challenge people to think and change their attitudes and mindsets about how they see the world. And so I'm a huge proponent of optimism and changing your life. But it still takes people like you who are willing to learn so that you can share that information with others. So that's, once again, why I want to showcase what you're doing. Now, last thing I want to talk about as we begin to wind down, Uber has actually started showing they're having flying taxis. Have you seen these? the flying vehicles?
I haven't seen the flying taxi. I think I've heard of them. I saw them with Amazon though.
Yeah, but Uber has a flying taxi because there's a consortium, I forget what it's called, but the government has already created the, shall I say, the bandwidth, if you will, or, we have the aviation department for planes. Well, they just released an aviation department for drones. Yeah. So basically what that does is that allows companies to have airspace with these drones. Now, the small drones, Amazon's using, there's companies in, I saw a really amazing story, I think it was in Africa, where they're using these drones to deliver drugs and medical supplies to these little remote areas in Africa, which they couldn't get to because there were no roads. So there's lots of amazing things that's happening. But these Uber taxis, there's a thing out online now that there were certain requirements. And I think the requirements were number one, there has to be somebody in it though. It's not gonna fly by itself, but it had to seat 4 people. And it also had to have a range of, I want to say 300 miles. So when they were setting all of this up, your vehicle had to meet those requirements. It had to be able to lift 4 people a certain amount of weight and be able to travel 300 miles. And they've exceeded that. I mean, so there's actually, I think, 3 companies now that are working on these flying vehicles. And so I'm reminded of the cartoon, The Jetsons. You remember The Jetsons?
Yeah.
It's real. It's actually happening. Now, it may be 10, 20 years down the road, but I will assert that I guarantee you flying vehicles are going to be commonplace within the next 50 years. So to me,
Definitely.
that's pretty exciting. So with that being said, now you're talking about teaching youth design. So tell us a little bit about your initiative to teach young people about engineering.
It goes more than just young people. It's at different levels, and it's starting at the college level.
Okay.
But I eventually do want to bring it to the K through 12 and even preschool level. Quick side story: my friend, he's an architectural student at Syracuse, and one of my mentors actually founded a Montessori school, private Montessori school here in Nashville. And he asked my friend that studies architecture to come in and teach them about design, about what an architect does. And that day they happened to be making these sculptures. And they gave them just miscellaneous material like rocks, maybe had like grass, leaves, wood, and then some standard craft materials, and just gave them the freedom to create whatever their heart desired. And my friend came in, he's like, "Oh, what do you guys make? You guys making sculptures? Like these look like the kind of models he's making in his grad school." And so rather than sit and teach them about, oh, this is what an architect does, he says, "Okay, tell me what you think these are as far as structures." Like one kid was like, "Oh, that looks like a mall or airport." And they gave me an idea. So, okay, let's do a lesson and tell me what you think these structures are. And it was beautiful because it brought out the inner architect and the inner designer in them, and it allowed them to see their understanding of form and space and environment, and that natural architect and engineer that we have inside of all of us. And hearing that story made me think about, like, okay, well, like I said, everything in society is by design. If we teach the design process rather than teaching how to do and how to make, but how to design and looking at everything through the standpoint of design and improvement and making things better, I think that teaching at the K through 12, preschool, and collegiate level, even post secondary and continuous education to adulthood, like having that mindset of design rather than do and make or consume. I think we could really shape a better way forward if that becomes a commonplace viewpoint that people have. And something that I've been working on with my university is that I find that a lot of programs focus too much on the fundamentals, and you either get to your senior year where you really begin to put the pieces together as far as design and how you apply these. And I see myself as an innovator, and I like to think I'm a self-proclaimed genius. You know what I'm saying? And so whether or not that's been fully realized and materialized yet is up to debate. But I see myself as somebody that has untapped potential that I can give society, and I'm just now getting started at 25. And I want everybody to see that in themselves, and especially the people that have this urge to innovate and to create. I want them to not look at, okay, what's now. I want them to be the what's next. So when you're saying, how can we be part of this conversation? Like I want people leading these conversations. I want them on the cutting edge. I want them to be the Musk and the Zuckerbergs. And that's the kind of atmosphere that I'm trying to create with this program is, design by any means and continuously push the envelope of human innovation and ingenuity.
Now, with that being said, I noticed a couple of things that you've said that I'm curious. So you talked about being one with nature.
Yeah.
You talked about sharing your gifts. So right. I sense a connection to something greater than yourself. So how does spirituality fit into your worldview?
It's fit a lot more in recently. Honestly, I lost that connection through my teenage and early adult years, and now I'm beginning to find that because despite all my mistakes and despite where I could have fallen off, great opportunities still come my way, and great opportunities to pay it forward still come my way, and so that made me feel like I do have a purpose, and it's greater than just doing the work. So they're real human problems that we got a car going by. they're real human problems that society needs to solve. And I really feel like I've been called to help solve them and called to help other people find out their gift in themselves. And I do see it as a divine intervention. I'm like, with it, you know, despite all these things, despite me losing that faith, I still continue to be blessed, and I still have the opportunity to bless other people. So I have gotten that connection with my spirituality and my connection with God back, especially as I grow, further into my adulthood and evolve as a man. I definitely realize the need for that kind of connection.
Well, without question, I know that there are no accidents in a perfect universe, and we've been brought together to share some ideas. But I would agree with you. You are a genius waiting to be expressed in amazing ways. I see you just making major contributions to the world. I'm so glad to see people like yourself, young Black men who are out there shattering the stereotypes and just really expressing their gifts and being so aware of everything that's going on around us, the need for teaching engineering and the things that you're passionate about. I love how you say you sharing your gifts, because I do know that that's what you have. You have lots of gifts. You've been blessed with lots of gifts. So I want to make sure that you acknowledge yourself for the gifts that you're sharing with the world. And so I'm just tickled to death, man, to have connected with you, to have had you on the show. And
likewise.
So now I'd like you to give you an opportunity just to kind of any closing thoughts that you'd like to share based on what we shared today or whatever's on your heart to share. Go ahead.
I'd say that, for anybody listening to this show, that life is definitely, it's a cyclical thing, and it's not, you never are finished with your life's work, and it's an ever evolving process. And so to keep that mindset that, if I'm down right now, if I'm not where I want to be right now, then look at where you've been, look at what you've gone through, look at the obstacles you've overcome. When I look back at my 20-year-old self, 21, 22, 23, when I look at myself last month, I've seen such a huge transformation. And when you really hone in on your power to self-correct and to change your course and to be the true, going back to design, being the architect of your own life and your own reality and really owning that power, you can make really positive transformational changes in your life and the lives of others. So keep an open mind, continuously self-improve, and do the best that you can to bring out the best in other people.
There you go. Bring out the best in others. That's awesome. Now, I got one final question.
Yeah.
Because my latest book is titled The Cure for Onlyness, A Black Man's Guide to Joy, Passion, and Purpose.
Yeah.
And the intention of the book was to support Black men in recognizing that there's a lot of times when we're the only person of color in an environment.
Yeah.
And we have to be able to navigate those experiences. Now, based on what I've heard from you, I'm sure you've been in that situation several times. So how do you handle that experience of onlyness where maybe you're the only person of color in an environment?
I think it used to make me uncomfortable, but that was more when I was the intern, when I was, the new guy. And now that I've owned myself as an entrepreneur and as an innovator, I walk into rooms with my head held high because I know that I'm not just here passively. I'm here to contribute, and I'm here to own this room, to own this discussion. And my friends, they kind of call me a chameleon, like an infiltrator, because I'm good at moving through different spaces. And I see myself as a Robin Hood. I go and I take this information, I learn, I can gain this experience, and then I go and evangelize that within my community and disseminate that. And that's the role I've kind of thrust and accepted upon myself. So it doesn't really bother me as much knowing that, seeing, have you ever heard of the movie or seen or read the book, The Spook Who Sat by the Door? Like, that's kind of how I feel in a societal sense, going and having my ear to the ground and hearing what's out there and seeing what's out there and being able to and spreading that. and not having information and ideas being siloed within certain communities and being excluded from others.
Yeah, and so the cure for onlyness, and you touched on it, but the cure for onlyness is self-actualization.
Right.
The cure for onlyness is knowing who you are and being so comfortable in your own skin. As Robert said, you walk in the room, you own the room, regardless of who's in the room, because you know who you are. And
Right.
that's what this show is about, helping you recognize and own who you are. Because when you have that confidence in yourself, you can become unstoppable. Will there be challenges? Absolutely. Are there things like racism and discrimination? Absolutely. But when you embrace who you are, invest in your potential, you can handle and navigate any situation. And that's what this show is about. It's about giving you the tools to shatter the stereotypes and step into your own power, because that's what I want you to do. Step into your own power. So Robert, man, I just want to say thank you for spending an hour with us, sharing your insights and wisdom. So how can people get in touch with you if they want to contact you about what you're doing?
You can contact me on LinkedIn, Robert Turner. I don't know if you plan on sharing that for your show. I can also share my email. I have a particular email that I like to give out. I don't know how I feel about giving that right now, but LinkedIn would be the best way to go.
I'll tell you what, I can just put a link to your LinkedIn page.
That's beautiful.
And so I'll just put that below the video. So if you want to contact Robert, you'll see that right below this interview, there'll be a link that'll take you right to his page. If you want to contact him, let's just do it that way.
That's perfect.
Perfect, perfect. Well, again, man, thank you so much for shattering the stereotypes. Keep being awesome, my man. Keep being awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. So this has been another episode of Shatter the Stereotypes. And I want to leave with a simple comment. Say yes to life. Yes, there are challenges. But until you say yes internally, nothing outside of you will change. So embrace your awesomeness. Say yes to life. Shatter the stereotypes and create the life you know you deserve. We'll see you next episode. Take care.